Hello everybody and welcome to the fourth and final video on our series of videos on Northern Ireland from 1920 to 1998. Today we are going to continue looking at the Troubles. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes. This time we actually have 4 learning outcomes as opposed to the usual 3 because there's a lot to pack into this video. So first of all, I would like you guys to know what happened on Bloody Sunday and the consequences of it for Northern Ireland. Second, I would like you guys to know what the Sunningdale Agreement was and how it failed. Third, I would like you guys to know what happened in the hunger strikes and the consequences of these hunger strikes. Fourth, I would like you to know how political peace was brought to Northern Ireland. So, on the 30th of January 1972, there was a planned protest march in Derry. This march was in protest against the policy of internment. New internment jail had been opened near Derry, and the NICRA had planned a protest march against this. There had been fear of rioting breaking out. So British soldiers who were still stationed there from the time of the Battle of the Bogside were prepared for perhaps conflict breaking out. However, what happened shocked everybody. The protesters were fired upon by the British soldiers. 28 unarmed people were shot at. And 14 people were killed. Some of these people would have been killed even trying to bring back the bodies of other people who had been shot. Some of them would have been as young as 17 years of age as well. As a consequence of this, there was wide-scale riots in Belfast and Derry and even in Dublin itself. The British Embassy in Dublin was actually burned as retaliation for this horrific assault on the nationalists and Catholics in Derry. This also led to the collapse of the Northern Ireland government. The British Prime Minister Edward Heath suspended the Northern Ireland government and he introduced something called direct rule. So direct rule meant that Northern Ireland would now be ruled from Westminster. William Whitehall was appointed as the first Secretary of State and he would now be in charge of running the government in Northern Ireland. They felt that the biased unionist government could not get enough support to bring peace to the area. So direct rule was introduced in 1972. This then led to negotiations between Edward Heath, the Prime Minister of Britain, and Liam Cosgrave, who would become the Taoiseach of Ireland. They tried to get a plan in place so that self-government could return to Northern Ireland. And the plan that they came up with was known as the Sunningdale Agreement of 1973. What this emphasised was 2 things. The first thing was it brought in a power-sharing government. What we mean by this is that it would no longer be a government purely dominated by unionists. The unionists and nationalists would both get to put representatives onto this kind of assembly and they would rule together. There were more unionists on the assembly, but finally the Catholics and nationalists had somebody to represent them. And the 2 parties that really shared this power were the Ulster Unionist Party under the leadership of Brian Faulkner, who had been Prime Minister prior to direct rule, and Gerry Fitt, who we've met before, the man who was responsible for setting up the nationalist SDLP. The second aspect of the Sunningdale Agreement, which caused quite a bit of problems and backlash from the unionists, was the establishment of this thing called the Council of Ireland. This was the establishment of a cross-border council, and it would work as an advisory role to the Power Sharing Assembly. So the Republic of Ireland would now have influence on what was happening within Northern Ireland. This, of course, caused massive opposition from the unionists, led by Ian Paisley in particular. Along with other extreme unionists, they really opposed the Sunningdale Agreement. It's also worth mentioning here as well that the extreme nationalists also opposed the agreement, especially the Provisional IRA and the party that would be associated with the Provisional IRA, which was the Northern Irish branch of Sinn Féin. In response to the Sunningdale Agreement, the unionists, the extreme unionists, encouraged a thing called the Ulster Workers' Council strike. So the Ulster Workers' Council was a trade union, and they held a strike on the 15th of May 1974 to show their opposition to Sunningdale. They were backed up by the UVF and the UDA, which would be Ulster Defence Army, and they did this to show their opposition to the power sharing Sunnydale agreements and to the Council of Ireland set up. Within this 3 days after the strike started, the Republic of Ireland was bombed. 4 car bombs were detonated in Dublin and Monaghan by Unionist paramilitary forces, which killed 33 people. This was the biggest terrorist attack ever to hit the Republic of Ireland, and really caused a lot of anger in the south. However, the Ulster Workers' Council strike was successful. It lasted for 14 days. They cut electricity, they blocked roads. As I said, Unionist paramilitaries helped in making sure that the strike was a success. It brought down the government of Northern Ireland, and once again Northern Ireland returned to direct rule under Westminster. The next big set piece or battle of the Troubles would be characterized by the hunger strikes. So what happened was prisoners or nationalist prisoners or members of the IRA held protests in the H blocks of the Maze prison, which is outside Lisburn. You can see here they're called the H blocks because the blocks are shaped like H's, and this is where prisoners would have been held. The IRA prisoners wanted political prisoner status. They wanted to be treated differently from criminal prisoners. They would be allowed to wear their own clothes. They'd be allowed to have calls. They would be allowed to be with the other prisoners. However, this was continually denied. They were treated as normal criminals for breaking the law of the land. This led to a policy of hunger strike. Bobby Sands would be the most famous of these people. He led a hunger strike as a protest for this refusal to recognise political prisoner status in 1981. Bobby Sands didn't eat for 66 days and finally died of starvation, really becoming a martyr for the nationalist cause. A policy was put in place whereby the hunger strikers were staggered, and over the next couple of months after Bobby Sands died, a further 9 hunger strikers died. The consequences of the hunger strike was there was a surge in IRA activity after the hunger strike deaths and large anti-British feelings south of the border. This was a very emotive policy to pursue that to this day still causes a lot of resentment within a lot of people. But it is a controversial issue that really has very nuanced arguments for both sides of whether they should have been treated as political prisoners or whether they should have just been treated as regular prisoners. Another consequence of the hunger strike was Sinn Féin, who was a nationalist party who were deeply associated with the IRA. They began to gain greater support. Because of this greater support for Sinn Féin, there was a worry that they would usurp or take over from the SDLP as the main nationalist organisation. And if they were to do that, it would become more difficult for Britain and Ireland to negotiate with more extreme nationalists. So Gareth Fitzgerald, who was Taoiseach in 1985, and Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister of Britain in 1985, they signed a thing called the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1985, and this gave the Republic of Ireland a say in the running of Northern Ireland. This was really to try to make sure that nationalists wouldn't go to extremes. They could see, right, the Republic has a say in this. Violence continued, the threat of violence continued. Finally, in 1993, the Downing Street Declaration was signed here by John Major and Albert Reynolds, Prime Minister and Taoiseach respectively, and this was to lead to an IRA ceasefire. However, the ceasefire didn't last, and sporadic violence continued to break out between 1993 and 1998. But finally, in 1998, the Good Friday Agreement was reached. So this historic agreement created another power-sharing government, and it was led by John Hume, who had been one of the founding members of the NICRA, one of the founding members of the SDLP, and David Trimble, who was the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. And these two men actually went on to win Nobel Peace Prizes for their work in trying to bring about a kind of political peace within the country. Of course, not everybody wanted this to succeed. Extreme unionists, especially the DUP, refused to participate in this power sharing thing, and also the IRA were very unhappy with this. In fact, in August of 1998, the IRA exploded a car bomb in Omagh of County Tyrone. It killed 29 people, but the bombing actually caused outrage and dealt a huge blow to the IRA's mission. The picture below is quite a spooky picture in that this was taken moments before the bomb went off. The red car you can see in the photo there is actually the car bomb that went on to kill 29 people. Thankfully, the child in that picture wasn't killed, but 29 other people were killed. It's important to note that while the Good Friday Agreement has been put in place, this was just a political piece. There is still massive social unrest, distrust within the communities of Northern Ireland. And it is important to be sensitive and be aware of the different viewpoints of everybody. A lot of people lost a lot of loved ones in this conflict. And for those wounds to heal, there needs to be massive awareness and sensitivity around issues concerning the north of Ireland. That brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know what happened on Bloody Sunday and the consequences of it for Northern Ireland, mainly the implementation of direct rule. You guys should then know what the Sunningdale Agreement was and how it failed by the strike that was called for. Third, you guys should know what happened in the hunger strikes and its consequences, which again saw a rise in popularity for the IRA, for Sinn Féin, which consequently led to the Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1985 due to the fear of extreme nationalists gaining more popularity. And fourth, you guys should know how political peace was finally brought to Northern Ireland, and that would be through the Good Friday Agreement, through the efforts of David Trimble and John Hume. That brings us to the end of our presentation. Hope you guys got something good from this video.